You want to know what poetic justice looks like? Try watching the same HOA that tore down your so-called ugly wall run, screaming in their pajamas at 1:30 in the morning when the mountainside you warned them about finally decided to pay a visit. That's how this story ends, but it's not where it starts. My name's Noah Leno, and if you've ever tangled with an HOA, you'll want to hear what happened the day they demolished the one thing standing between our neighborhood and disaster. Now, I'm not some crank living in a shed. I've been a geological engineer for 37 years, and I read a mountainside the way most people read a headline. I know what clay does when it gets wet. I know how water moves under the earth, and I can smell a landslide coming before the first pebble lets go. But none of that mattered the day I got a letter on expensive HOA letterhead informing me my grandfather's retaining wall, the one I designed and built with my own hands back in 1987, violated their brand new aesthetic standards. Their words, not mine. You ever get a letter so smug you can almost hear the person who wrote it tapping their acrylic nails against their phone? That was Bell Maddox all over. Bell took over the HOA a year after it formed, swept in with a perfect blonde bob, a real estate attorney's smile, and enough attitude to make Martha Stewart nervous. She was out to make Riverside Cliffs Instagram-worthy, which, as it turns out, is code for let's bully the old-timers off their land. Bell didn't just want order, she wanted control, and she was willing to weaponize the bylaws to get it. Funny thing is, the real estate developers who'd been sniffing around our neighborhood for months had a knack for showing up right after a disaster. Pinnacle Development Group, yeah, the same one that cut corners in Colorado, killed 12 people in a landslide, including my wife Sarah, then blamed unpredictable geology. So when the HOA demanded I tear down a wall that kept 70 meters of unstable slope from flattening half the valley, let's just say my engineer's paranoia started twitching. Eleanor Hartwell, 67. Ex-legal secretary and more dangerous with a notebook than most people are, with a gun, showed up on my porch with coffee the morning after I got the notice. She'd been keeping tabs on Bell since day one. "Noah, you need to see what's really going on here," she said, her eyes sharper than the wind off the river. Turns out Eleanor had collected emails, printouts, and meeting minutes going back 18 months, enough to make any conspiracy theorist blush. Pinnacle and Bell, in cahoots before the HOA was even official. Compliance violations, voluntary buyouts, backroom deals. It wasn't about how the wall looked. It was about how fast they could get me off my land. Now let me back up a sec. My wall wasn't some backyard project. 4 meters high, 80 centimeters thick, full concrete with rebar and seismic anchoring. My grandfather called it ugly as a cow's behind, but solid as the Lord's promise. 3 decades, not a single crack. It held back thousands of tons of clay, the kind that turns to pudding after a good rain. But the HOA didn't see stability, just an eyesore. So I did what any stubborn engineer does. I wrote a 47-page report full of diagrams, soil samples, photographs, the works. Laid it all out at the next HOA meeting, right in front of Belle and her fresh-cut flowers. She smiled, thanked me for my input, then tossed the whole thing in the trash, literally for everyone to see. "Mr. Leno, your wall violates our community standards. It must be removed." Half the neighborhood just stared at their shoes, the other half pretended not to notice. Except Eleanor, who sat in the back taking notes like she was prepping for a Supreme Court case. What Belle didn't know was how much Eleanor had on her. After the meeting, I wound up at Eleanor's kitchen table, surrounded by printed emails, some from Bell to Pinnacle, discussing targeted acquisitions and how to encourage voluntary sales by manufacturing violations. The kicker, they referenced the Colorado tragedy, my wife's death, as leverage against me. That's when it got personal. The HOA moved fast. Within days, Bell scheduled another emergency meeting. This time, she brought up my past news clippings from the Colorado slide, my role as a consultant, the fact that I'd warned of a slope failure that killed 12 people. She didn't mention Pinnacle ignored my warnings to save money, just that Mr. Leno has a record of disaster. It was psychological warfare, pure and simple. Overnight neighbors who used to wave suddenly avoided me. Folks I'd known for years started whispering. Belle was winning the public opinion game, and she knew it. That's when the twist landed. Eleanor's nephew, Jake, young whip-smart geologist and son of one of the Colorado victims, called me up. Turns out he'd been running new seismic data on the neighborhood. Noah, there's a fault line running right under your property, wasn't in the original surveys, but it's active now. If that wall goes, the whole slope could cascade. His 3D models made my hair stand on end. We weren't talking about erosion. We were talking about a rolling tsunami of earth big enough to wipe out 50 houses. Armed with Jake's evidence, I confronted Belle at her own home office, dropped seismic reports right on her polished desk. Her response, ice cold. You're a liability, Mr. Leno, not a profit. She threatened legal action, gave me 48 hours to comply, and made it clear the bulldozers were coming whether I liked it or not. That was the point. I realized this was never about aesthetics. It was about money control and keeping the right people quiet. Thursday morning demolition day came cold and gray. 6 men in safety vests unloaded jackhammers and an excavator barely meeting my eyes. The foreman, looking apologetic, handed me a court order signed by Belle. Sorry, sir, but we've got to do this. By noon, 36 years of structural protection was reduced to rubble. Belle showed up with a photographer grinning like she just won the lottery, posing beside the gaping wound in the hillside for the next HOA newsletter. You want foreshadowing? Even Eleanor's dog refused to go outside and the birds vanished. By nightfall, I could hear the earth groaning, water trickling out of places it never had before. I slept in my clothes, phone charged, heart racing. At 1:23 a.m., the house began to shake. I watched through the window as a hairline crack split open where my wall had stood. Then the world tilted. The landslide started slow, then built to a roar like thunder rumbling through stone. I grabbed my phone, went live. HOA destroyed my wall. Now the mountain's falling. Within minutes, 2 million people were watching the disaster unfold in real time. Belle's $1 million house gone. Pool garage, tennis court, luxury cars, all swallowed in a wave of clay and broken concrete. Her screams were the only thing louder than the crash. But by then, I was already running door to door, banging on windows, getting families out before the slide took the rest of the valley. 47 minutes of chaos, mud up to my knees. Memories of Sarah's death pounding in my chest. But this time, nobody died. Eleanor. She ran back for the USB drive that would nail Belle and Pinnacle to the wall. Emails, phone calls, everything. When emergency crews arrived, 8 houses were destroyed, 11 more unlivable, but every resident was safe. News stations picked up my live stream. The next morning, I was fielding calls from CNN, Fox, you name it. Eleanor's evidence landed Belle and the developers in federal court within days. Insurance fraud, reckless endangerment, you name it. The HOA dissolved. We formed a new safety council. This time I got to set the standards. Jake got a scholarship. Eleanor became a local legend. And for the first time since Sarah died, I felt like I'd done something right. The irony. As we rebuilt, every new wall was engineered to the same ugly standards as mine. Turns out ugly saves lives. But you want to know the punchline. The last time I saw Belle, she claimed I'd sabotaged the wall just to make her look bad. As if gravity and physics were my personal minions. The courts disagreed. Pinnacle went bankrupt. The new homes are built safer. And the biggest lesson, sometimes the ugliest thing in the neighborhood is the truth nobody wants to hear. So tell me, what would you have done? Have you ever seen a petty rule become a disaster? Drop your story in the comments. Because, trust me, someone out there needs to hear it. And if you're fighting your own battle with power-hungry HOAs, hit that subscribe, because this isn't the last time ignorance is going to go head-to-head with experience.